trying to watch water boil here. Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, November 20th, 2023, 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the Jamestown Middle School. Reminder that at 4:30 this evening, we had the Teacher Leadership Academy presentations, and congratulations to all those that presented today. I'd like to welcome all those in the audience today. Thank you for coming. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dan, would you please read the school board norms?
I got it. The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Dan. We have nothing under public communications. D, conflicts of interest. Would the board like to declare any conflicts of interest this evening? Any conflicts of interest? If not, moving on to our consent agenda. Would the board like anything removed from the consent agenda? At any time, a board member can remove an item. It does not need a second. Would anyone like anything removed? If not, is there a motion? We have a motion by Jamie. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to our regular meeting, under recognition, we have Blue Ribbon School for Gusner Elementary. Principal Anderson, would you please come forward and say a few words?
All right, good evening, and thank you for the invitation on behalf of Gusner. Just touching base on a little bit of the process for this nomination. I was made aware last spring that we had been nominated. The state had reached out at that time and said, we like your chances, essentially. They said you meet all of those indicators to be nominated for this award. And then through the process, it was reassuring to be able to just look at what we're doing as a school, as a district, and how we're meeting student needs. And it's quite a long process. There's a lot of hours of paperwork, and there was some late deadlines, and it's quite a process to go through it all. But it does really reassure you in what you're doing and the process and how you're getting there. And one of the main questions that came from all of this process was, what would you tell other schools, or how would you convey your message? What does it take? And it was really reassuring just looking at it, a strong collaborative effort between a district, the community, the parents, the staff, and some really great students. And if you look at Gusner's history, this is my 7th year in that building. 10 years ago, they had won the award as well in 2013. And the one consistent approach has been a really, really solid staff and a really strong family foundation from our parent stakeholders. So that was the recipe that I conveyed, and I truly believe is what's allowed them to be successful. Some really strong educators with some strong families. So we just want to thank you for the invitation, and we're glad to be here.
Thank you, Principal Anderson. Jason, would you read our announcement? And then we have a great turnout of the Gusner staff here. I'm just going to have you come over this direction, and I have a plaque.
Gusner Elementary was designated a Blue Ribbon School Award winner on September 19th, 2023. The National Blue Ribbon Schools Program Award recognizes public and private elementary, middle, and high schools where students achieve at high levels or are making notable improvements in closing the achievement gap among student groups. Gusner Elementary was one of 3 North Dakota schools to earn this award for 2023. Gusner was also awarded as a Blue Ribbon School in 2013 and is only one of 6 North Dakota schools to have earned this distinction twice. The category in which Gusner was recognized for was exemplary high-performing schools. It is a tremendous honor for Gusner Elementary and Jamestown Public Schools to be recognized for the effort and achievement of its students and staff. Recognition such as the Blue Ribbon Award can only be achieved with a high level of collaboration between staff, students, their families, as well as community support. 2 teachers were recently recognized by U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona in Washington, D.C. Senator Kevin Cramer presented a flag that had been flown over the U.S. Capitol, and on December 18th, Senator John Hoeven will be at Gusner Elementary to recognize the Blue Ribbon Award and present a flag to the school. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations again. Moving on, nothing under correspondence this evening. Under reports, we have student council report. Please come forward and tell us your name.
I'm Gabby Tweeten, and I am co-president of the Jamestown High School Student Council. A couple Fridays ago, we held a hat day at the high school. We encouraged students to bring $1 to wear a hat. The money was raised for a local family who lost their belongings in a house fire, and we were able to raise about $400. We also held a blood drive on November 1st, and we had 18 people that were willing to donate, and some of them were able to donate multiple pints. Some upcoming things: the Jamestown High School Student Council, as well as the 8th grade Student Council, is going to Student Council Convention in Bismarck from December 10th through the 12th. And Hattie McDonald is going to represent the high school and run for Class A representative on the state board. That's all.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the board? Gabby, any financial issues with going to this convention? I know a few
Right.
years past, there was some fundraising.
So right now, we've talked to the activities director, and we got buses and hotels taken care of,
Okay.
and the students will pay for their activity fee of $75.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Moving on, Board Education, Educational Competency, Security Updates. Darby Heinert and Mike Armitage. Please come forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. We recently met with Marco about just a few weeks ago, and they came to our building to kind of assess where everything will be placed. And so since that time, well, actually before that, House of Glass came in and put in our new sliding petition, which will be used once kids enter or parents or patrons come in from the first door from the outside by the Commons. And so we have that in position. We're also looking at some new furniture for that area to make that whole space come in to play as well too. We then moved on to the media center. That place will, both doors from the Commons and from the educational wing by the bathroom will have locking access. So in the event of a lockdown, we'll be able to push a button from that desk right for where we check out books, and those doors will automatically close and lock. That will be a great relief. I know that was a concern for Mrs. Berkeley in terms of having to lock those doors. We also looked at access to the north, which would be by our special needs classroom. And so that area too will have a fob access for those students and teachers to use in the event that would be a better access point for them. So.
So in addition to the high school, we're doing the transition house and the CTC as well. Each of those 3 buildings will have their own controller, and they'll also be set up with a video camera. So it'll be exactly, probably better than what we have at the elementary schools. They'll be able to see who it is and talk to them more clearly. Kind of like a glorified ring is what we really set them up with. So We're supposed to, just got off the phone with them before board, approximately 2 weeks is their estimated start time.
So.
Dr. Leck, would you like to add
I
something?
just want to make the addition that it's been long been a concern at the high school level. We have secured access at every, from K through 8, and the secured access didn't exist at the high school. And part of that rationale was because of students traveling from the high school to CTC. And really, this was the opportunity that we had to mirror that secured access at the high school level, which we were lacking. And so this provides a pretty good opportunity for us to do that. And I believe under what was budgeted in our capital projects plan, when it's all said and done, it'll be under what we had originally budgeted for. So that's good news.
This will come in under our camera security at the Vigilon, and ultimately our goal will be to update all the other buildings to the system as well.
Sounds good. Any questions? Diane?
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask if this might be interesting to the general public and educational, if I were a parent coming to pick up a child, say for an appointment, what will happen as I come up to the high school?
Well, no appointments necessary. You know, they'd be able to just come in, they'll ring the buzzer on the outside, they'll come into that first set of doors, and it's there where they'll meet our receptionist, and they'll find out, well, depending on what the intent of the visit is. If it's just to come to the office, we would check their ID there, they'd be given a visitor badge, and then whether it's to see administration, a counselor, it could be a meeting with the teacher, whatever that might be, we would direct them accordingly.
So the only difference is going to be they're going to buzz in.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. That
I
sounds
like
great.
it from the standpoint that it's also going to help us with lates as well. Sometimes, depending on the flow of that big window area right now, if there's 8 kids standing there waiting for assistance, they can just kind of mosey on by. And so it holds them a little bit more accountable at this point, so we'll be able to give them that slip right there, and we can record that late into Power School. So, yep.
This system will also allow us to track who's in and out of the building, teacher-wise. We're going to set it up primarily where you'll have 24/7 access, but we'll discuss with the directors and principals, and we'll be able to actually program the times people can get in, and then we'll know who's in and who's not in.
Very good. Any other questions from the board? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to the superintendent's report, Dr. Luck.
Thank you. You have my written report. Just to touch on a few areas, I've shared a little bit about 360 feedback loops for administrators in the past, and really what these do, and I've given you the 2 examples of what we use. We are on a 6-year rotation, so every 3 years, one of the administrators, or every administrator, will be provided a feedback loop through 360, either the 21st Century Administrator, which I've linked in the report, Educational Leadership Profile, which I have linked into the report. But really what they exist to do is to provide feedback from stakeholders, from the teachers and other staff in the building that help the administrator in the building understand staff perspective related to operations of the facility, leadership of the administrator. It's a good opportunity. So just to go back, what we do is we offer this survey to staff. We leave it open for a window of time. I then compile all that data into a portal, which they have a chance to view. I create a self-reflection along those lines of what is seen in there, and then we engage in a conversation, the administrator and myself. And so as you can see from the 2 different surveys and from the compiled data links, there's quite a bit of information that comes through to the administrator, and they have a chance to gain an understanding of the perceptions along those different areas. The surveys range from, I think one is 45 and one is 85 questions, or it's 55 and 85 questions, so a substantial amount of information. And so the administrator has a chance to sift through that and then work through my self-reflection as well to gain some insights, and then we strategize around what did they see? What are areas of strength and how can they be better? Take those areas of strength and really even embolden them greater. And what are areas to develop and how can we strategize around improving in those areas? In my experiences, they have been well received by the administrators because it gives them a lot of data to work with. And this allows them to model what we talk about every day when we're observing teachers, which is coaching for growth. And so, like I said, the feedback has generally been very, very positive. I will say that feedback, 360s are not evaluations. We don't go and conduct this to turn around and then make that an evaluation. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to give perspective. And we target some areas that we want to improve upon, and we target some areas of strength and work to make them better. I think it is a great process and one that I'm very happy that we do. And you know, I'll just stand for any questions if there are any with 360s. Okay. Every year at this time, we talk about inclement weather. Not that we want inclement weather to happen, but we are prepared for it to continue to be something that we have to work through. I attached Board Memo 81, which was provided to the board in the past, but it just gives us historical context for how we make weather decisions related to inclement weather, the process that we work through prior to closure, and really focusing on how those decisions get made. So one of the questions we always get asked is, you know, how does that work, and what, how do we decide, are we making this day up, or are we not making this day up? Is this a virtual day? Is this a grace day? So we have really three different options. One's a grace day. That means we already meet the required hours that are recognized by the state of North Dakota for school. The legislature was really clear that they still would like to have 175 contact days, or contract days, I should say, not necessarily student contact days, but 175 contract days. But there's greater flexibility depending on your schedule to how those days are scheduled. So the options that we have are grace day, which means we aren't making up those days that day because we already have the requisite hours embedded into our schedule. Second would be a makeup day. We're required to have, or we have makeup days in our calendar. You just approved a calendar last meeting, and that includes 2 makeup weather days. And then the other option for that would be virtual days, and that's something new that we explored this last year, not because we wanted to, but because that's what the weather informed us we were going to do. We had, really, an experience last year much different than anything that we would have hoped or thought would occur. And so, and actually, the board memo that I've re-referenced, it's pretty clear that virtual is not our preferred option. Virtual can't make up for face-to-face, and it won't be prioritized before face-to-face instruction. And I know districts do that across the state. Schools have different levels of interest in virtual, and different communities have different levels of interest in virtual. Some schools go right to virtual, some go makeup and then virtual, and there's a mixture of others. And it really just depends on what the community and what the community really is looking for and what that school is looking for. For us, my perspective has not changed, that we make up days first before we explore virtual. There is not a replacement for the face-to-face instruction, and I would much rather us schedule a day later on in the school year than to try and utilize a virtual day that is not the same as an in-class day. So for us, and this question gets asked a lot too, and it's not, and I can't say that it's the schedule that will always be in place, but it is, generally speaking, the framework that I look for. Weather event number 1, the first one of those is a grace day. There's some historical context to that decision. Before we switched to this days to hours standard number of hours, there used to be days, and the Department of Public Instruction allowed us flexibility for 1 day. As long as we met a certain hour requirement, we were able to go and use our first inclement weather day as a grace day. So historically, that's been the case. We've just continued that practice. So inclement weather day number 1 is almost always a grace day. Days 2 and 3 are our makeup days. We have 2 days embedded into our schedule. That is our preferred method, is to have that makeup day. So that is how we will operate our second and third days. In the very few instances in which we've had more than 3 storm days, then we go into consideration for virtual. And that really just depends on a number of factors, including when the storm hits, did we have a chance to get devices home to kids? Are our staff prepared? So almost always we're going to operate with those 4 days that I outlined: Grace Day, Makeup Day, and then consideration for virtual. I will say that there may be times when we stack days together, like we have a 2-day storm. We might do a Makeup Day and a virtual day because we have time for our teachers to prepare. We target 9 p.m. the night before or 6 a.m. So if our community members don't hear from me by 9 o'clock, they need to wait till 6 a.m. the next day. We want to make sure that communication happens as timely as possible. The weather doesn't always allow us to do that. I wish it did. I wish we had a real clear sense by 9 o'clock every night, but that's just not reality. And if we're going to do virtual, we make that decision the night before. We make that the night before to give teachers the opportunity to prepare adequately for a virtual learning day. But we have to target 9 o'clock the night before if we can, because our families have to make childcare decisions. It's not as simple as just saying we aren't having school. Well, that means businesses may still be open. We have families that need to make childcare decisions. They may need as much time, they will need as much time as possible to react to that changing environment. So we want to give them as much time as possible. If we can't, if we just don't know, then we operate at 6 a.m. Even though 6 a.m. is a pretty early phone call to get from me, we need it to be that early because that's when our buses start picking up kids. So those are the guide rails for us as it relates to that. But again, we have that custodial responsibility, and we have to understand the impact that happens when we don't have school. But that never changes the fact that we make the decisions that we make with the priority of safety for kids, safety for staff. I think it's important to bring that up too, because even if we can get kids to school, that doesn't necessarily mean we can get all of our teachers to school. So we have concerns with our staff. We have concerns with getting our facilities ready to open up. That might be making sure entrances are accessible. So a lot of that goes into the decision making, but again, our priorities: Grace Day, Makeup Day, and then consideration for virtual as it goes along. Hopefully we don't have any inclement weather days, but I think it is helpful for our families to understand the consistency of how we structure those inclement weather days and when they will know. And like I said in my report, unfortunately, I would love to say that I've made every correct call with weather, and it seems sometimes we go in cycles where we could have had school, and I say, and we canceled school. I remember a couple of years ago looking out the window and looking at pretty green grass and just hoping for a couple of flakes. That's really all I wanted, was just a few snowflakes to kind of do the Charlie Brown curlicue around. But you know what? We make the decision we make based on the information that we have. If we prioritize kids' safety, our community gives us a lot of grace. The last thing that I wanted to bring up is how we operate with our non-emergency support staff during inclement weather. We've tried that a few different ways. In the past, it's been a very minimal amount, and we haven't heard a lot of perspective from staff because it's been a Grace Day, and it hasn't really been a big issue. We really heard in the last year, because we had so many storm days, that it was really a pretty significant impact to our support staff. Those are our hourly people that really rely on their hours in that month span. I think we had a good intent to allow for some makeup. And as I really thought more about it and reflected on our practice, we changed it a few different times, all in the effort with the best of intentions to try to make that the best opportunity for our support staff. We value them. We know how important they are to the workings of our buildings, all with good intent. But I think we missed the mark a bit. And I think we were thinking about it like how would a business operate, right? You know, and when you close down Menards or any other business, you close, and if you were supposed to work that day, you didn't work that day, and you don't get paid. But the thing is we aren't a business, we're a school. And our funding operates a little bit differently than Menards. When Menards isn't open, they don't make any money. When the school is not open, the state still pays the same amount, you know, and we budget it for the same amount. And as I've thought about that a little bit more and talked to other schools and how they operate, I think we're missing the mark, like I said, and we'll come to a plan, with a plan to the board in the near future, because we have to start thinking about what would happen if we do that again. But I do believe that as I've had a chance to think it through and talk it through, I believe that we should be, like many districts, be paying our support staff that hourly wage if we are closed and they are not able to, you know, come into work and fulfill that responsibility. Again, I think we had the best of intentions in how we were doing it. I just don't think it was the right plan. I think I made a mistake in how we did that, and I would like to make that change moving forward. Again, I'll probably draft a board memo that outlines what that looks like, and I understand that that may not be how everybody might deal with that, but I think it's the right decision for our support staff. We really saw that last December when we had 4 days on a short month. That was a pretty significant, what we heard from staff was that was a pretty significant financial hardship for those that depend on that time. And so we also heard that from in the communications committee. That was one of the pieces of feedback we heard from our education association as well, that they felt our non-emergency support staff during that grace day or virtual learning, when they don't have specific roles and responsibilities. And again, that's non-emergency support staff. And that we should be looking to compensate them. That's very similar to what happens at the city, what happens the Park District and things, other political subs that are close to us. So I'm going to pause just for questions if there are any.
Any questions on the board? Jamie?
Mine's more of a comment. I just want to say I really appreciate our district's proactive procedures to canceling school when there is inclement weather and letting us know at a decent time too. As a parent, that's very helpful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jason?
Another comment too, that I think when Dr. Leck makes the call and makes the actual phone call, I have found it very helpful when it is stated at the end of that message, this day will be made up. Sure. And I know you were going to continue to do it, but I think that that has cleared up a lot of confusion. Yeah. And I think the message here is everybody has a different way they would do it. This is not set in stone, but until further notice, that is the plan that will be followed. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a general framework that we operate with most of the time, unless circumstances require it to be a little bit different, but that's kind of the general.
Any other questions?
Okay, so as it relates to pay schedules, I'm sure the board is aware that we pay on the 20th. I mean, and that has been fairly consistent. That is support staff, that is contracted staff. Again, when we think about our support staff, when we are onboarding our new support staff, they can go about 6 weeks without pay. For that classification of employee, that's a really long time. We've had some conversations at central office about what would that look like if we paid twice a month. But even beyond that, even if we don't go down that road, because I think we need to get some feedback from our staff on, maybe some things that we haven't considered that might keep us from doing something like that. Before we'd make a significant change like that, we'd want to get feedback. But even if we maintain it to be the 20th, we're going to shift our practice for our new support staff that at the very least, they would be paid twice a month. So we already have, for activities, we pay on the 10th and the 20th. So at the very least, our beginning now, our new support staff would be paid on that 10th, at least what they have worked up to that point, and then on the 20th, just to get them a little bit of pay before, so they're not waiting quite so long. I do think that there is a very realistic, realistic idea that this hurts our recruitment. When people find out I have to wait for 6 weeks before I can get paid, I might go somewhere else. And so we want to eliminate that, or at least mitigate that issue. But at the very least, we need to be thinking about how our pay schedules impact our support staff. So maybe more on this coming forward if we do decide for all staff to be paid on, say, the 5th and the 20th. But at the very least, we'll be doing something for our new support staff. One of the areas that will be represented in our strategic plan and that the board has talked about in the past is engaging with our staff to analyze school culture and climate. We have partnered with a company called Vital Network, and I did send information out to the board on this, but this Vital is a fully reimbursable partnership through the Department of Public Instruction. In the last legislative session, the state allocated somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million to Vital Network to conduct these engagement surveys and to work with school districts to improve culture climate for the purpose of increasing recruitment and retainment of staff. Their focus is on voice and decision-making, time management, and care and support through a series of engagement strategies, goal-setting activities, support activities, and check-ins. And then, like our strategic plan, we'll kind of check in at the end of that school year and see how did we do, and then re-establish new growth guidelines for the next year, growth areas for the next year. So we'll operate with Vital over the next 2 years. And they will serve that purpose of creating that baseline for us, and that will be something that in our strategic plan we can anchor to those goals and anchor to those metrics to determine how we're doing. I think it's a great partnership, but as you see that bill from Vital Network come through the bills, that, just as a reminder, that is a fully reimbursable project. So we expend that money, we enter it into web grants, and we are fully reimbursed. So it is absolutely no cost to the district. It is a state-supported program. Later on in the agenda, you'll have a request for release from contract from David Frickel. As you noted in the release request, that is due to health issues. And my recommendation to the board, of course, we need to be sensitive to needs of our staff. And based on my understanding of the request, I believe it's most appropriate to offer a conditional release, assuming that we can hire an adequate replacement. This is a critical shortage area, and we are in the middle of the school year. And I think that is the most appropriate path. And just as a note, as I referenced in my report, any staff member is still able to access sick leave for any appropriate medical concern and take unpaid leave as needed. We talked about recruitment and retainment in the survey with the Vital Network. I am also serving on the governor's task force for teacher recruitment and retention. So I have reached out to a number of different stakeholders already, and I will do that with the board as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on this task force. I think it's important work. And from my perspective, if you're going to devote time to it, you better make sure that something good comes from it. And that's my focus and my goal. So if there are any areas that the board would, or individual board members would direct me to talk about, I would be happy to do that. But it's something that over the next year I look forward to spending quite a bit of time doing. I've started already. I think I'm on page 5 of different things. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm going to have Christy help me a little bit with this one. The North Dakota Study Council, which is the Class A schools, or what used to be Class A schools. It provides a large school perspective to education issues. So there is a group called the Study Council that represents that large school perspective. And we are working together to engage in a state level and then a regional or a district level study for a salary study. And this has been something we've talked about in the past, looking at how do our salaries, our support staff, contracted staff, how do those compare? And it gives us some data to work with. I think when we've operated through City Council, depending on the number of schools that choose to participate, I think we can really drive those costs down to make them reasonable, and Christy will give you some numbers. But I do hope that this is something that we can engage in, because I think this is data that we need. We can look at state level data, but you know, if at a very low cost we can get a little bit more depth to that salary compensation and those hourly wage compensation, I think we can make better choices as we move along. Right now, I think sometimes with you know, when we consider our support staff schedule in particular, sometimes we're throwing darts. We don't have a metric that we're looking at. We're just trying to do the best that we can. And I think this would give us a sense of what works, you know, what we're comparing well, and what areas and specific positions we need to improve on. And so I'm hopeful that we can look to do something like that. If you want to give us direction on that, we would certainly accept that. If you'd like to wait to get a little bit firmer numbers, I would understand that as well. But I think some general idea on if this is an area that's supported by the board would help us communicate with the study council as well. So if you can give us some cost estimates.
Right now, the total cost for the baseline is $25,000, and it would be divided out depending on how many schools there are. There's a base cost for each school that would be between $750 and $1,250. And then the rest of that would be based on enrollment. So if right now there are 3 schools who already have said yes, they want to be included, and just based on all their enrollment and ours, I estimate it would be at the most for our portion $1,500. So if I take the $1,250 maximum plus the $1,500, and then also if there are additional optional reports that I assume that we would want, I would ask that you would consider that we would get the additional. If we're going to be in the study, we would want the individual reports about our school and how we can implement their recommendations should we choose to do that. So a maximum amount would be $8,000, but it could be less depending on how many schools participate.
So I would appreciate any feedback or general direction on this.
Aaron?
Yeah, at those levels, I'd fully support going after that data and bringing that into our district.
I think it's a good idea. I'm curious on how do schools generally have similar job titles? So that would be my only question, because we are, you know, when you're looking at different size schools, there's a little bit different roles. So I guess that would just be my question on, you know, usable data.
Yeah, I don't know the direct answer to that, but I would imagine that they are grouping positions together, you know, in a way that would be pretty consistent.
Dan?
Yeah, it's kind of my question is how much do we have input to how this is structured, or are they coming to us with kind of a cookie cutter approach?
The company that is going to do, that they've contracted with, works only with public sector or public sector businesses. So I think they have a pretty good idea of maybe what a smaller school versus a larger school, and the way they put their information together. So, yeah. Anything?
Well, and I would say too, Dan, we are part of a consortium that's doing this. If we were to contract with them individually and pay all of it, I think we could get a real granular report about what we want. To a degree, we have to recognize that we're working with, you know, a pretty broad swath. And so I think we'll get some granular data, but it maybe isn't going to be the same level of data that we would get if we were just to contract with them on their own. Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Any other questions?
So the feedback I'm getting is move
Feedback.
forward and bring a,
Yep.
we can talk and make a commitment and then bring an agreement back. Okay? Transportation consortium bidding. At our last meeting, you approved a JPA for transportation bidding. We completed a draft RFP that has been sent out, and our Joint Powers Agreement Consortium, so our transportation consortium, will be meeting on December 21st to open those bids. And so President Larson will need to appoint a board member to represent the board during that bid opening. Now, a decision won't be made at that meeting. It will be the opening of the bids. The administrators will get together after that. We'll kind of talk about bids, and then that consortium will come back and make a decision when we're ready to do so. It won't be that day. So we'll do a Zoom opening on the 21st, and then we'll meet as administrators and talk through the proposals a little bit. And then at some point in the future, we'll have that group come back together and make a decision. So a lot of opportunities for feedback and communication with the full board. The last thing that I have with my report is a grant opportunity, or a few different grant opportunities. Our high school did receive the Choice Ready grant, which we're very excited and appreciative for. They couldn't fund all of the Choice Ready grants. As the years have gone on, more and more schools apply for Choice Ready, so they become much more competitive. So unfortunately, our JV, CTC, and our Special Education Consortium grants weren't funded, but our high school grant was funded, so that's $20,000 that we'll put to good use again. The last thing that I have is we're also requesting board approval later in the agenda to submit North Dakota Regional Workforce Impact Grant. And I don't have a lot of information for you about that grant right now. We are chasing the deadline. It is in a broad swath. This is a grant to support childcare at JVCTC, but it does not commit you as a district to this idea that we would provide childcare. It would be a grant that supports infrastructure. So some of this just simply depends on, are we awarded the grant and how much? And we would be able to assess what we need to do, and then the board would make a decision, are we going to pursue that idea or not? If we don't pursue that idea, we would simply turn the grant back and say, okay, we aren't going to do this, award it to somebody else. But if we do get the grant, then we would have to look through at a larger scale and say, okay, is this an idea that we want to pursue? What would it cost? What would it not just cost to do, but what would it cost to run? Because there would be a cost associated with doing this, whether that is fully placed on staff or whether that is, if any of that is borne by the district, what would, so that whole business model would need to be discussed. But this just is a good opportunity that exists right now in a very narrow window of time. And so we're asking for board approval to submit a grant so we can make a better determination if we're ready to move on that or not. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
Back to the Vital network. That was a 2-year process, was that correct? So then
2-year
after
commitment, yep.
So after those 2 years, do we still have the tools to revisit these things, or is it like a one and done?
So that depends on the legislature. I couldn't answer that question. I think it depends on the experience that schools have. But regardless, we're going to have that data that we could tie to, whether it is Vital or whether it's something else that we choose to do. We would still have that data, and I think the baseline data is going to be important for us anyway, at least from a metric standpoint, right? I mean, the short-term nature of it is we're going to get a better sense of culture and climate and things that we can do to improve recruitment and retainment. But from a long-term metric standpoint, I think that data is going to be good for us regardless. Although I will say without state support, I'm not sure that that's the financial commitment I would make. But
Any other questions from the board? Any other questions? Okay, if not, moving on. Nothing under old business. Under new business, we have nothing under activities, buildings and grounds, curriculum, assessment, instruction. Under finance, A, approval to submit the North Dakota Regional Workforce Impact Grant. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Is there a second? A second by Melissa. We have a motion and a second to approve
to submit the North Dakota Regional Workforce Impact Grant. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of budget revisions, and then there's subsequent C, general fund balance for your information and monthly financial reports for your information. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve, is there a second? Second by Aaron. We have a motion, a second to approval of the budget revisions. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. 5, personnel. A, request release of contract. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, is there a second? Second by Jamie. So we have a motion and a second, and now we'll do some discussion. Dr. Luck?
Just seeking some clarity. Are we releasing with any condition, or is it simply a release? What is the motion? I just want to be clear on what our direction is.
Melissa, you want to clarify your motion?
If it's a health issue, I just don't really see making somebody stay in a position like that. It's not going to be conducive to that person, nor will they be doing the job that they should be. I don't think. I know when I'm not feeling well, I'm not doing my best. So I would say that I do realize that it's a really hard position to fill, but if it's a health issue, we need to release.
Jamie, is that your, no, so, okay. Okay, we're in the discussion part. Jason?
So, adding conditions, what would that look like? It was stated that Thanksgiving break is going to be it. Let's say Mr. Frickle doesn't show up after that. But we approve here with conditions, right? And then he just doesn't show up. What's the ramification or consequences, I should say, to that?
Be considered breach of contract.
And then that would determine, or it would depend on us how far we'd want to take that.
Correct.
Right? Yeah, I just don't see what we're gaining. And I'm bringing this up for someone to, be devil's advocate or whatever, but I just don't see what we're gaining by doing a conditional motion.
Gail?
Just for thinking of continuity of services, has he been out with health conditions, and is there somebody who has been subbing that could potentially fill that? I know we're short of subs, and we're especially short of EL educators.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about any individual
That would be
staff
hard to
members' leaves or things like that, but I can just tell you in general, we would look at any individual staff member, and if there is a need for a sub, we would find a sub for those, assuming we can find them. But if there are, typically if there is a leave request, we look to find a sub unless it's a position that doesn't require a sub like mine.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Dan?
Yeah,
No, okay. We can come back if you have more. Dan, go ahead.
as much as you can. Yeah.
So you'd mentioned in your report there were potentially other options, like currently under contract, like with the unpaid leave and things like that. Is that something that would have to be considered by the board, or is?
No, if the reason I bring up other options is if you make a conditional release, right? That means conditions assuming that you can fill that position. Individuals can still take leave or request unpaid time to fulfill their contractual obligations. My concern becomes leaving a contract in the middle of the contract term and setting precedents for what that may look like. I can very rarely give you a recommendation to release from contract in the middle of a year, particularly in a critical shortage area. That can very rarely be a recommendation that I provide to the board. I get concerned about what precedence that sets. So that would be my concern there.
Aaron?
Yeah, and I'd share those concerns too. I mean, the contract is there, and it is a contract. There is terms in there for sick leave, and there is terms there for leave, and that's a part of the contract. And the precedent of releasing a contract should be not be taken lightly.
Jamie?
I mean, I just feel like we look at these individually anyway at every circumstance. So if this, that someone's trying to leave the contract next year or later in this year, this is going to always be looked at individually. And I can't imagine forcing the stipulations on our staff member who is dealing with certain struggles as well, and then forcing them into their contract. But
Any other discussion? Aaron?
Can we articulate what the actual motion is that's in front of us here?
So there currently is a motion and a second for a release of, to release the request, release from the.
Without condition.
Yep, to approve the request for release of contract without conditions. That's currently the motion and the second, and we're in the discussion phase. And that was the agenda item, so we needed the motion and a second to move into the discussion, so. Is there more discussion, comments? So we have an option to approve the motion, or we have an option to reject the motion, deny the motion, or another option would be a conditional contract for replacement of, or something. Yeah, but right now we have to motion that what's on the table, so yes, correct. So those are the board's general options. So, yep. Gail, your hand up. No, okay. Your arms, I thought your hand was up, so.
And I don't know, I would assume they're working with our human resources people and with our employee assistant issues regarding these health issues to get the most assistance available for them. That might help me make a decision better. Are they having access to everything that they can to deal with this health issue?
So I can't speak individually about individual issues, but I can say as a general rule, our supervisors or HR will make opportunities available and known, and then individuals make the best choices that they can based on their own individual need. And I'm not trying to be evasive with the question. I simply can't, provide that level of detail. But
in general for any employee.
correct. And we would want to make sure that services and supports exist, and that individuals have an opportunity to take advantage or make the choice to take advantage or not to take advantage of those. To some degree, our recommendations are based on, the best information that we have.
Dan?
So with the termination of a contract, though, those services stop at
Correct.
the end of the month or whatever the.
Correct.
Okay.
And to a degree, it could even impact health insurance coverage, or when they could get on COBRA and those types of things too. I mean, it's at a certain point, they would bear the cost and would not be able to continue on a health insurance plan, for example, but that would extend the life of coverage through COBRA because they would be part of that a little bit longer. Hopefully, I'm making sense with that.
Dan?
But do you have an estimate about what a current timeline would be to try to find an EL teacher? This would be, like you said, a high-need area that.
Very high need area, very difficult to fill a spot in that arena. But just like in any case, whether it's conditional or unconditional release, we're still going to be looking very hard in recruiting for a position. So that side of things doesn't change from my perspective. It's simply the release from contract. And I understand, when I make recommendations like this, I've gone through the same struggles that you do. How can we sympathize and empathize with an individual need and balance that with contractual obligations and the role that you have to uphold those. So I understand the quandary that the board is in, because I'm in those too. When I make a recommendation, I have to consider that as well.
Gail?
So just to give me a better reference, what is our current caseload? This person would be 6 through 12, and what is our current caseload K through 5?
I'm going to
Just
give
get
you
a
a sense,
picture.
K through 12, because that's the best I'll be able to, about 70. So right now we'll have one FTE with about 70 EL students, K through 12, which is a lot. It would be a lot it's a lot with 2. And as we register, we have more EL needs coming in. Every month when we register, we're bringing more needs in. So it's pretty short. We're not even on a skeleton schedule. We're beyond that with 1. But again, we'll be looking, regardless of the actions the board takes tonight, we'll be looking very hard to try to fill that position as soon as we can.
Any other discussion? Steve?
So if we would deny the release, there's very clear paths forward for both him and for us.
I think so. I think if you're, so I just want to be clear, the motion that's on the table now is an unconditional release. So you either say yay or nay. If you say nay, then you have a different motion to make, which might make a conditional one or something of that nature, or whatever the board opts to do. But I believe that from a district standpoint, we would not change our path to try to fill the spot as soon as we could. And the individual staff member would have to work to communicate timelines and request unpaid time, those types of things. But to be completely honest, I'm not so sure if things on that individual's end would change either. It's just about what are we going to do? Are we going to grant leave? Are we going to, I think it's clear that the individual, at least for right now, is not choosing to come back. So I'm not sure that would change, although who knows what happens in the coming weeks. That could change. Perspectives could change too. So I'm not sure I completely answered your question, but I think I very much have a clear path forward, as superintendent. And I think the individual staff member would have some choices to make as well.
Any other discussion? Okay, so just so everyone's clear, we have a motion and a second on the floor to grant a request of release of contract that was in your drive. Any other discussion? If not, Christy, you want to do a roll call vote for us today?
Jamie Bear? Yes. Heidi Larson?
No.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Gail Nelson? Dan Tweeten? Oh, okay, no, okay. Dan Tweeten?
No.
Aaron Roberts?
No.
Steve Veldkamp? And Melissa Gleason? Okay, 3 yeses, 5 no.
Okay. Motion failed. Is someone, Dan, would you?
I move we authorize a conditional release of contract per Dr. Leck's recommendation.
Is there a second? Second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second to offer a release of contract that is conditional.
Pending hire of.
Pending hire of.
Hiring.
of
Replacement.
A replacement. Aaron, was that your assumption on that as well? Okay. So we have a motion, a second, for a conditional contract pending a replacement. Discussion. Jason?
So when you use the word replacement, does that include potentially finding a long-term substitute either until semester break or the rest of the school year?
I would say that includes any option in which the student services are provided at a level that we feel is appropriate. That could certainly be a long-term sub.
Gail?
I would also like to add that we encourage that we offer any kind of available support that we had to have to this employee, whatever that might look like. But obviously, this is going to be a person that needs a lot of support moving forward.
Dan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, that was my primary motivation was you basically stay within the fold. We'll help as we can by keeping this contract going. We'll be diligently looking, but at least he'll have access to the things that he needs.
Any other discussion? If not, assuming we'll do a roll call vote again, Christy? So I just want to make sure everyone understands. We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve release a contract that is conditional based on filling the position that meets the needs of our students adequately. So,
Okay. Heidi Larson?
yes.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Gail Nelson? Dan Tweeten? Aaron Roberts? Steve Veldkamp? Melissa Gleason? Jamie Bear? Okay. 6-2 approved.
Motion carried. Moving on our agenda, nothing under policy and procedures, nothing under tuition, and nothing under other. Under meetings to be scheduled, we have a Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, December 8th at 3:45 p.m. in the district office conference room. We have a regular school board meeting on Monday, December 18th. So remember, in December, we have the one meeting. So it's December 18th, 2023 at 5:15 in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. And then, do we have one more strategic
It will be before
planning? Yep. So we'll have another, it's not scheduled yet, but we'll have another strategic planning meeting, and then hope to bring the final strategic plan to the board for review and discussion. Anything else for meetings that may have missed? Okay. And any other agenda items for future agendas that the board would like? Okay, if not, please let Dr. Lecker or myself know. Under monthly superintendent evaluation, there is Section 2, Board Relations, Section 5, Community Relations. Being no further business before the board, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.